Welcome to Health Raisers. Health Raisers don't just survive, together we thrive. I'm your host, Dr. Nadine. Welcome, everyone. Today, my guests are Kelly Leonard, Executive Director of Learning and Applied Improvisation at Second City in Chicago, and Ann Libera, Associate Professor in Comedy Writing and Performance at Columbia College in Chicago, and Artistic Consultant at the Second City, also in Chicago. I found Kelly and Ann's work in an article in the AMA Journal of Ethics. It was published in July of 2020, one of my favorite years. I don't know about you, but I just loved 2020.
We all did.
So when I found this article, it was linked to another one that caught my eye that was about how comedy and medicine can intersect. And I thought, no way, as soon as I saw this, because when I was in medical school 100 years ago, and realistically, it was in the mid-90s, there was nothing funny about going to medical school for me whatsoever, okay? It just was not a joyful experience for me. But when I came across this link in that article, you're both the authors of this wonderful article called Improvised Caregiving, or How a Famous Comedy Theater Found Itself in Healthcare. And I was in nerd heaven. Everyone who knows this podcast knows I am a nerd. And immediately when I was done reading it, I emailed, or rather sent a chat message to Second City going, they're not going to answer me, but what the hell? I'm going to try anyway. Do you know Kelly emailed me the next day? I stood up and I did a little dance. So thank you for being here.
We're happy to be here.
We are. And I was going to say, no surprise, Kelly Leonard is extremely quick and responsive. So,
well, I love generous thought leaders like this. You know, a lot of times, and there's, I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone, but, you know, you find people that say, I'm just too busy. I've done that a bunch of times. Oh, don't have time. But, you know, Kelly's been very, very responsive. And I really, really appreciate that. And so without further ado, I would love to jump into how on earth you came into this work. To me, again, I didn't see the connection between improvisation and comedy, thinking it's in the category of entertainment and bringing that to the health and well-being realm.
So Adam Grant called me. That's how this started. So Second City, I had just recently stepped down from my position. I was a longtime producer, sort of creative head of Second City. And I'd stepped down from that position and was trying to figure out what to do next. I was basically a consultant for Second City. They gave me that title for a year, basically to build a bridge in or build a bridge out. And one of the programs that I brought Ann into early, she helped build it, was a thing called the Second Science Project at the University of Chicago. So we were already working in this area of behavioral science and improvisation and the evidence for the practices that we do. And then Adam calls me because he had a friend moving to Chicago. Her name is Ai-jen Poo. I was not familiar with her or her work. I soon would be. And she is just recently stepped down as the executive director of the Domestic Workers Alliance in a group called Caring Across Generations. And we sat down for lunch, and this is like, I think I came home and like it was the second time I've had a conversation with an amazing woman in a leadership position, and we just connected, and we saw how the work we were doing at the University of Chicago could easily pivot into the caregiving space. And her group happened to be curating Aspen Ideas Festival, and we decided to Ann and Ai-jen led a workshop, and then we also did a presentation that was hosted by a New York Times writer, and that's how it all got kickstarted.
I want to share too that the base of this work came from my experience as I was the artistic director for the Second City Training Centers for many years, and the experience of seeing students who went through our beginning improv program, and this is a program for people who just want to meet people. It's not meant to teach you how to become a final performer at the Second City. It's people from all walks of life. But the thing that happened was they would be in this program for a year and they would come back to me and they'd talk to me and say, this work changed my life. And what it didn't do was make me a star. What it did was make me a better communicator. It made my relationships better. It made my work life better. And that idea, the idea that, as Kelly says, improvisation is yoga for your social skills, that it's a practice, that we can teach people how to behave better and practice behaving in ways that are more healthy for them, is really the sort of underlying quality of both the Second Science Project, where we're using insights from behavioral science, and then really deeply meaningful work with the improvisation for caregivers, where we're giving people tools that they can practice and then use.
So take me back a little bit more to the theory. What was the spark that caused you both to decide there is a juxtaposition between the world of improvisation and the theory behind it, the principles behind improvisation, and people's well-being, people's health?
Oh, we've been there for a while. A funny thing happened at Second City in the training center was we started to notice certain people, a different kind of student was showing up. And it was clear as day that there was something going on here. And it turns out that there was a psychiatrist who was using improv classes at Second City essentially as group therapy. So he would send his patients, say, sign up for like level A classes, and then they would do their one-on-one session later. And we actually ended up teaming up and creating an improv for social anxiety program. And then we were brought in for a study using improvisation to work with Parkinson's patients. We have an improv and autism spectrum program. And these are all small programs that started basically someone found us or someone wanted to do a study or someone showed up in another class. Mm. And we just, the spirit of improvisation is yes and. We were like, okay, let's see. And by collaborating with experts, we weren't just relying on our own expertise, which is not in these various areas. But the great thing about improvisation is it's the ultimate, we're teaching you how to collaborate well. So we're really good at collaborating. And we're very good at giving others space. And we're not afraid or we're not worried. And these are the phenomenon that we learn in behavioral science is there's just so many barriers that human beings put up out of fear. And improvisation is a practice in allowing you to get rid of that judgment of self and others and basically, tramp the fear down and up the openness to experience. And so that's an easy pivot to a space where, whether it's a mental health issue or even a health issue. And I mean, even in trauma, right? Bessel van der Kolk writes about improvisation in The Body Keeps Score, that those exercises and those practices are really useful for people to sort of, when they're trying to embody their experience of healing. So, and along this journey, we ended up collaborating with the Cleveland Clinic and others. I think it all happened at a time where the world was ready for this. Because I will tell you, Second City has worked in the corporate area for quite a long time, but like 15 years ago, no one in the medical profession is probably up for this. But I think enough has been written about. There's been enough studies, enough business books, like enough gurus talking about this work that, and then once people do it, they're like, I totally get it. So we were the we had the benefit of great timing.
I think one of the big things about improvisation that makes it so valuable to people who are looking to improve their lives in a variety of spaces, but particularly in spaces like the healthcare space where it's very complex, is that you're not role playing. You are doing exercises where you are yourself and you are learning how it feels to shift the way you interact, how to shift the way you work with someone else. So I'll give you an example of an exercise that we developed actually as part of the Second Science Project. And we were, Heather Crusoe, who was the scientist from the University of Chicago, who's now, is she at USC?
UCLA.
I don't know why I have a block on that. Nothing to do with how brilliant Heather is. But we were talking about how do you have useful conversations in which there is genuine disagreement. Right? How can we have, when we are polarized, how can we have disagreements? And we came up with a prompt called Thank You Because. And the way this works is if you and I are having, and it's based in behavioral science around the power of gratitude, but we would set people up in a situation in which they genuinely had different points of view. And when we teach it, we use something fun like which way the toilet paper goes.
Turns out that is kind of polarizing, though.
One of my favorite moments was when I brought that up, and one of the scientists at the University of Chicago was like, no one cares about that. They all know that the right way to do the toilet paper is to have it go over, and suddenly the room erupts in disagreement. But you have people practice using something that they genuinely believe, right? And the cue of this exercise is that one person states their opinion, and then the other person, before they disagree, and that disagreement can be real, but before they disagree, they have to state something that they found genuinely valuable in what their partner just said that they're grateful for. And then they don't have to agree with them. They can state what their area of disagreement. But what it allows you to do is have this kind of warm, respectful, listening conversation. And you may not get to a place of absolute agreement, but it gets you closer.
So it's an empathy exercise.
It is both an empathy exercise, but it's also an exercise to help you handle your own emotions when someone disagrees with you.
Emotional intelligence, right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And Xuan Zhao, who is a postdoc who worked with us, actually studied this exercise. And using this exercise, people felt stronger feelings of warmth towards each other. They felt like they were getting further into the conflict and that there were ways in which they might be able to resolve it.
They stayed in the conversation longer.
The conversation, right? And the funny part was early on when we were working with it, we all, there's a point at which a number of the members of the team got a little bit cynical about it and like, oh, thank you because, and until we realized that we were using it on each other when we were having genuine disagreement. And that it worked. That when we were genuinely in disagreement, when you're in that space of conflict, it is a genuine way to help yourself in terms of emotional intelligence, indeed, and to get to a different place with another person.
And I think you can look at the world we live in right now and understand why that might be an important practice.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and I love that you just said that word. It was yes, because it ties into what I was observing while you were both talking. This posture, it's a posture and a lifestyle. Yes. And living improvisation. It's not a container or a tool to be used in specific circumstances. It sounds like to me that you both live that way.
Yeah. I mean, it can be. It can be used in a variety of ways. What I think Anne and I, the reason we're so passionate about this is that we have found success in our lives when we simply follow those principles. And although we are considered experts in our field, we don't do that all the time because we're human. And that's when we don't succeed. And, so there's no perfection. It doesn't exist. I was just having lunch with some folks I've worked with, and we were just talking about the fact that, I think Nick Epley is one of the scientists we work with, and one of his papers, he talks about the fact that most human interaction, 80% is wrong. We get about 20% right. We mishear, we don't get the gist of it, we forget all those things. And if that is even remotely true, the idea of entering into a conversation with humble curiosity gives you an incredible edge, because most of us aren't doing that. And what we also know that is human beings crave connection and they just want to be seen and heard. Mm-hmm. More so than fame, more so than wealth. They want to be seen and heard. And so if you can do that for someone else, the positives of that are limitless in terms of what human beings can do together. And I think the reason, thank you, because I talk about a lot in various keynotes that I give, and it resonates with a lot of people. I think because they're looking around the world they're in, maybe it's school, maybe it's work, culture, politics, all of that, and we're seeing the results of the opposite. These illusory bubbles that exist. And we're going to get nowhere if we're not doing this together.
Well, and again, I keep coming back to the idea of practice. And I have a yoga practice. I have a meditation practice. It's not easy to do this. It's not somebody saying, oh, just yes and, just use thank you because. These are not that someone can tell you to see someone and recognize them for who they are. But it's not natural.
Because we're also wired to protect ourselves and defend ourselves. That's a deep biological need as well.
Yeah. Ann and I both listened to this podcast recently. Our friend Scott Barry Kaufman, who's a scientist, had another scientist and just talking about the power of not wanting to be otherized, which will allow you to further a fiction. Like, you know it's not real. And when you and he has very specific research that they've done where people have sort of agreed with something that didn't happen because it's a part of their in-group. And then when they go have a one-on-one deep conversation, just dramatically increases the fact that people admit the untruth. And the other thing is, like, I don't know how many biases they've uncovered. Something like 120, I think, classified. If there are that many biases operating inside human interaction, I can't believe we can feed and clean ourselves. How, let alone build businesses and, so life is a wonder that we're able to do this. But it really, to do things, and I think I think experientially I felt this too, is for people who are successful, and I'm not talking about people who are rich, I'm talking about people who are happy, they live life differently. They walk through the world differently, and they have a sense of peace and a sense of calm. And not to say that their lives are perfect, because they aren't, but that I really think a lot of this stuff can be rooted down to what we know within neuroscience, behavioral science, positive psychology, and then those insights mean nothing if they can't be activated. And one of the ways they get activated, as Ann says, is through practice, and not just scrimmaging. So, like baseball, think about all peak performers. Baseball players play catch before the game. Yo-Yo Ma still does his scales. But the business world has billions of dollars on the line. And how many of those people are practicing? They don't.
And again, I mean, one of the, cornerstones of the Improvisation for Caregivers program, as we were working with primarily people who were caretaking for family members with dementia or Alzheimer's. And one of the key tenets of improvisation, of course, is yes and. But it's really hard when your mom or your dad tells you, "Oh, I'm going to go down to the store and meet a friend," and you know that friend doesn't exist anymore. Your initial response is going to be no. So the ability to practice being with them and being with them in the world that they're in and saying yes. And doesn't mean that you say yes, go down to the store. It means that you can say, yes, I see that that's something you want to do. And it's not natural.
Does you started to mention your yoga and your meditation practices. Do they help you take that pause in the moment so that you can access the yes and, so you can have more of the interaction that you want to have?
For me, yes. The ability to, it feels like it's all one thing. But the difference is when I'm doing my yoga practice or when I'm doing my meditation practice, I'm not doing it with other people. I'm doing it by myself. And so for me, one of the wonderful things about bringing improvisation into it is that, that moment when you're done with your yoga practice and you're like, I am so centered, it's all here. And then you have a conversation with someone. There's a real continuum where I can be, there's the essence of improvisation is being present with someone. The essence of what we call ensemble practice is about being in the moment with the people who are there with you now. And so it to me, it's a really natural extension.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different kind. I mean, it's a natural extension, but there's a difference to it. And when I can apply them all together, it makes a huge difference.
Can you give us an example of yes and for people who are not really familiar with that terminology? A story example. Sure.
So the root of this that we discovered scientifically comes from behavioral economics. So in behavioral economics, it's shown that people's default position is to do nothing or say no. So that is which most people sort of lean to. Mm-hmm. So literally, yes and is a nudge to do the opposite. And so when I talk about yes and in various contexts, I'm most talking about the beginning of a conversation, the beginning of a brainstorm, the beginning of a project. It's a way to get an abundance of ideas out there, everyone participating, everyone feeling involved. And that's really vital with the information that we know, which is more diverse views from diverse team members is the way to get better original insights and ideas. So yes and operates at the front end of the creativity to innovation process. So, and creativity and innovation, two different things. Creativity is messy. There's a lot of failure. That's all yes and. That's the thing. But if you want to innovate, that's when you bring out the no. And no is very good. No is good for boundaries. No is good for framing new ideas because that's innovation. Innovation is now I'm going to take all this stuff and turn it into something. So there's this bricolage thing that's working here, which is, I've got all this variety of different ideas from my yes and now we can synthesize and draw down. And there's a thing called the IKEA effect, which our friend Mike Norton from Harvard studies, which is that human beings value more the work they feel they participated in. So with yes and, everyone's worked on it. Everyone's participated. And then it doesn't matter if their 5 things didn't end up because they're part of that conversation, that team. So it speaks to human beings and how they tick, but also to this process of how truly do we, everyone says they want creativity and they want innovation. Very few people know either they conflate those two terms and they don't understand the process by which one gets there. And one thing, Anne and I'm very lucky about, yes, she is a teacher of improvisation, but my many years leading the Second City is the Second City creative process for creating a new show is everything we're talking about in a 12-week period or a 10-week period. Where you start it's an ensemble that is while they have a director, there's a concept called follow the follower. So at any time, whoever's got the good idea, that's the one we're running with, and then it trades off at different times, and everyone's comfortable with that because we're all taught in this way. We yes and that first 4 weeks we are yes anding every idea, and then we are pruning and editing and figuring out the other things we need. And it's a very protected environment. It's like the scientific method for creating theater because we're doing this all in front of audiences. And they're telling us if they're laughing or not laughing, what's working and what isn't.
And again, I'm going to come back to, because yes and is a concept, but it's also, again, a really simple practice that I can listen to you and build on what you say. And I can literally use that prompt to say yes and this. And I'm teaching a class right now, actually at Northwestern, in the entrepreneurship department. And as part of this class, I have my students, we practice stuff in class, but then I have them bring it into their real lives. And they keep a reflection journal. And a number of them said that what was so interesting to them about using yes and in their real life was that it created warmth, it created closeness, it got them to, they talked about talking to their parents on the phone, and that most of the time when they talk to their parents, when they call home, it's an exchange of information, and that when they used yes and, they had deeper conversations.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't just my turn and your turn. Instead, I was listening to you and I was listening for something to build off of.
I was just talking to a very respected colleague. He was coaching with me in the Alt MBA, and I was talking to him about the power of curiosity, and I consider him to be a curiosity superhero. One, he's always been a curious person. He said, why was his favorite question since he can remember? And he started drifting into a conversation about reflections regarding his relationship with his mother. They were very, very close. She passed away 20 years ago. But it occurred to me while he was talking that because he was able to always ask those whys and his mother was open to it and actually did the same thing with him, that they were able to foster this deeper connection very early. And I think if part of what we're saying or not saying here is that curiosity is a practice folded into yes and.
That's right. We have a phrase, replace blame with curiosity. And if you can do that, that's a very powerful tool to have in your toolbox. So it cuts off the quick emotional, the fear of flight or fawn, and instead allows you, because we don't know what someone is going through and why they might have just said that thing. You know, what's the phrase? It's like, I'm speeding because I have an emergency. You're speeding because you're an asshole. This is the way we view the world, because it's the only way we know how to view the world. However, when you practice empathy, and it's not just about living in someone else's shoes, because that could also trigger sort of an emotional thing, though, which will hide the thing, because I can't say the word, hide the thing, maybe because you're emotional as well. So this curiosity, there's a little bit of distance, but you're open. You're open to whatever actually might be going on, and you can deflate, and you can. This is where thank you because comes in. Maybe you can actually turn that. This is like a very early business lesson I had at Second City when I was the director of sales. So this is like in the early 90s. Was that there was a group that came, and we do a lot of business with groups, and they had a bad experience, and it just sort of felt to me instinctively. I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to lose you as a client. How can I make this up to you? And what if we just gave your next group event is free? And if it goes well, we'll stay in business together because everyone makes mistakes. Well, they came, they had a great time, and they stayed on. And I was like, oh, like that's just like, people don't normally do things like that. And that just felt to me like the right thing to do. And it was by sort of, again, not getting emotional, but getting curious about the bad experience and then offering something. And you know, I think just generally speaking, we jump to conclusions all the time. You know, this is Anne turned me on to Danny Kahneman's work. He wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. And you know, system 1, system 2 thinking, if you think about what an improviser is doing, is they're doing switching back and forth from both. System 1, system 2, system 1, system 2. Because you're having to deeply listen to what the person is saying without pre-planning. And then you have to come back to your well of experiences that are going to allow you to come out with a sentence that is going to be understandable to the audience and the person across from you, that is building upon what the other person said. And very good improvisers, it looks like magic, but it's not. It's just this, they practice so much of this divergent thinking, which is a key element to being creative. And then extending that, yes, that works great on stage. How would that work in life, living a creative life?
We talked a little bit about wanting to be part of a community, the sense of belonging and acceptance, which is rooted in us, tribal, and that's how we survived.
Yep.
Community. But then there's also what the brain does, and I know this is part of the thinking fast and slow dynamic, and he breaks this down, but there's also the part of us that needs to categorize, to take shortcuts. Our brain wants to neatly create categories to keep us safe. So with that mindset, well, again, when I was in medical school, I didn't feel a sense of community. I didn't feel a sense of collaboration. It was never about abundance. You know, we didn't have this terminology back in that time. It was scarcity and it was fight for position. So how on earth do you gather? Because I could see this working, say, for caregivers who gather together because they don't have a position to defend necessarily. But what about if you take a group of medical students, or my husband is an attorney. We both are University of Chicago alum. I went for undergrad. He went for undergrad and law school. Then I went into Loyola for medical school. But we both experienced extreme competition. And not to say that we didn't make friends there. You could, and that was fine. But at the end of the day, you really had to fight for your position. So if you have a group of people like that who are not used to working together, I'll give another quick example. Rounding. You'd be on rounds with the attending, the different residents. Everybody has a rank depending on the length of your coat and all that. And and then the attending or the chief resident would turn around and grill you, a medical student. Do you know this answer? And if you didn't, you look like an ass because then the next person did. And, so it was always this sense of survival. All that long-winded to say, number one, I wish you had been around when I had been a medical student. But secondly, what is your experience like with groups that have that mindset?
So there's a couple. So first of all, if you go to the University of Chicago Law School today, you are actually taking one of our programs as an orientation program. And they've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years. And I mean, we saw this in action ourselves. Our daughter Nora was diagnosed with cancer when she was 16. And we spent a lot of time at Lurie Children's Hospital. And what we ended up doing was utilizing all these practices and these exercises in her hospital room. So one exercise that Anne developed is called, I think you invented this one.
Yeah, it's, in some ways it's applied comedy more than it's applied improvisation. It's called Universal Unique. And in the exercise, it's really about helping you practice small amounts of self-disclosure and to see the benefits of small amounts of self-disclosure, that sharing little things about yourself. So in the exercise, we'll have someone describe what people do when they grocery shop for about a minute. Generically. And then they describe what they do when they grocery shop. And again, this isn't particularly vulnerable information. This is just small amounts of personal detail. And immediately it's a different relationship and the discovery that it's funny, but it's also and literally there's great research around the fact that we tend to look at other people and not think of them as having a mind, as being really another human, right? That if you share little small amounts of self-disclosures, it changes their perspective for you. And we actually, when Nora was in the hospital, we practiced that. When a new doctor came in, when a new team came in, when a new nurse came in, we would give them small details about us, about Nora, about our lives. And Kelly was, I'm somewhat of an introvert. So it was really hard for me. Kelly did it every time. And what I saw was that his choosing to do that made an enormous difference in the way that our doctors, our nurses, is it 15 people coming through at any given time? It's a new person.
Yeah, specifically, it was rounds one day, and they came in, and this group all knew Nora, and we have a Bernese Mountain Dog, 100-pound Bernese Mountain Dog named Benchley, who's an asshole. He's an asshole. He's not nice. And most Bernese Mountain Dogs are lovely. He's not. He just loves us. And Nora literally got every single doctor to take out their phone and show us a picture of their pet. And it was almost all dogs. And it was such a great moment of equalizing in a situation where, as you suggested before, is anything but equal. But that happened because this stuff is contagious. And everyone played the game. And we utilize that stuff all the time and really created an ensemble of caregivers as opposed to, because we could see that she got better care, but we also saw that we were part of why that happened, because everyone saw her in her complexity, and so if there was something like really wrong, they saw it. And if there was, I remember I had a doctor say to me, he's like, if you guys, I know you, if you called, I'm going to have you come into the emergency room, because you're not calling when it's like because everyone knew us. And there was a great deal of self-disclosure, and it was a great deal because you're so vulnerable, in that situation. And that, we had created this program, and then we had to apply it to this horrible, horrible situation, which didn't turn out well. And then that was a whole grief journey that we had to go through, wherein we're also, how do we draw from our work to find some resiliency and deal with our grief and our trauma. And Anne was talking about her meditation practice, and then I started a workout practice. And so and then recognizing improvisation is embodied. So it's so vital to sync those things up. And it's hard, especially right now.
Yeah, I think, again, it was a very difficult time, but in the conversations that we had with the doctors and nurses afterwards too, was to say, how do we, and part of the discussion was, of course, and this in medicine, the idea is to not have an emotional connection,
which was really tough for me.
And I think, but the discussion that we had afterwards in working with some of these exercises with the doctors and nurses was that maybe that's not quite right.
Yeah.
Maybe that little bit of sharing, that little bit of connection, is what creates compassion and community, and, as we said, ensemble. I
used to do this little trick when I was practicing. We were looking at slides, so you can see how easy it is to be completely disconnected from, this is not a person, this is a number, this is tissue on a slide. Whenever I found myself getting tired, and I couldn't get up and walk around or something, I would stop and say, this is somebody's mother, sister, aunt, whatever, to humanize.
Yeah.
That was really important to me. And I don't know how you care for people. I understand the ideas to resist burnout or to protect yourself as a caregiver, but at the same time, how do you, it's a dangerous tipping point then to go into the land of complete detachment.
The Grant study is this famous study that Harvard has been doing for 80 years with the same group of men. In terms of judging what makes people happy. And overwhelmingly, it is one thing, and it's relationships. And so I think this idea of taking away the most important thing inside a medical experience is nuts. It's like, no, use it. And and again, as Anna and I've talked about, it doesn't mean you're sharing every deep, dark secret. You just know we work at Second City and we've got a dog, or whatever. Forging
connection. And the other thing I was thinking of is the way you talked about that, especially in a difficult situation, which I'm really sorry to hear about, by the way, is the simple fact that we as human beings do want joy.
And it doesn't just come to it. I think we were so betrayed by our media and our culture to the sole genius. Like Thomas Edison did this himself when he had tons of people in a workshop, or Steve Jobs or whatever. Great man theory, and also that creative people just have these amazing insights that dawn. It's no, it comes from work and comes from practice. Over and over and over again. And it comes from groups of people. We never do anything alone. Even if we're alone in a room, our whatever our endeavor is at some point is going to touch other people. They're either someone else is going to buy it or pay for it or help support it or whatever. So tending to and this is one of the things that was very frustrating as we started to go deep with the behavioral science community, is recognizing that the one thing that really hasn't been deeply studied is small groups. So most studies have to be, just like a bunch of numbers to prove a phenomenon. But in reality, most of us operate in small groups. Most of us have teams of 6, 10, 15, that. And so, we would get these arguments with the scientists because they'd be like, no, brainstorming doesn't work. And we're like, okay, first of all, that literature is shoddy. But secondly, the way we do it at Second City with a group of 6 actors working together over a maybe 1.5, 2-year period, like from the outside feels like that's the right thing. Like these are well practiced in the same stuff. They've got all these rules. They all understand it as they're coming in, but that it would take forever to study that. And it wouldn't be a big enough replication for size. So we're missing literature that actually speaks to the way most of us function in our various capacities, whether it's inside our families, inside our work groups, inside our friend groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay, shifting more to the practical then. So can you tell us about the actual programming that you do have in place at Second City available for, I'll back up a little bit. I was looking at your website, which I absolutely loved, and I was looking at the collaboration area, and it looks like you do have a lot of programming. And one of the blessings, and some people look at it as a curse, but I think having more virtual access was a good thing because you can reach more people, even though people are having Zoom fatigue, fine. But there's more opportunity now. You innovated, actually. I saw that on the website to adapt because you couldn't have in-person gatherings. So what are some practical offerings you have for people who may not imagine that they can get help for X issue, but there's this community that can help them?
There are so many different kinds of classes. So we're doing both virtual and in-person now, both at Second City, our theaters in Chicago and Toronto, and then all these virtual offerings. So the virtual offerings are, there's drop-ins where you can just pop in a couple times and see what it feels like. Any beginning improv class is going to be worth your time if you haven't done this work, because all those basic principles are, we've talked about some of them here. You learn about yes-anding, you learn how to do that practice. Very easy to do in virtual and of course live environments as well. So in addition to like beginning classes, specialty classes, then we've got the conservatory, which you do have to audition, and that's people who are generally interested in being on one of our stages or getting to SNL, that sort of thing. We have a ton of corporate offerings, both virtual and in person. So we work with all different kinds of teams. We get brought in to tech companies and law firms and consultancies and retail. All, again, speaking to the fact that I don't care what industry you're in. If you have a business problem, your business problem is probably related to human problem. Mm-hmm. And that is just like, it doesn't matter if it's a law firm or an advertising firm. The issues are that human beings that have a hard time interacting and working well together. So if someone might be bringing us in for storytelling or communication or resiliency or agility, but it's really about my humans with my other humans. And so, and it maybe is a little bit of all those things.
I want to do a quick shout out to our program, Humor Doesn't Retire, which is improvisation for this slightly older set. I'm going to share. So I want to share a story. Actually, I was in a yoga class, and one of the women in my class with me learned that I worked at Second City, and she said, "So here's the deal. My father started taking Humor Doesn't Retire classes at Second City," and she said. And he did it because he thinks he's very funny. He likes to make fun of my mother. And she said, and it was so interesting. She said, and I said, well, has he gotten funnier? She said, what's interesting is, no, he's not gotten any funnier. But the difference is, she said, this year, for the first time at the family Thanksgiving holiday, normally he would disappear into the other room and watch TV after dinner was over. this year, for the first time, he stayed with the rest of the family and joined in the conversation after.
Improved relationships.
I just said, he's not any funnier, but he's learned how to have those different things. So I wanted to give that a shout out, because I think it's just an opportunity for people to, again, I'm going to harp on this. It's an opportunity to practice being in conversation with people. It's an opportunity to practice listening and responding. It's an opportunity to practice best practices for doing those things, as well as just play, which we haven't talked a lot about in this conversation. But play is one of the wonderful ways in which we can use humor and use comedy in a healthy fashion. Bringing those little moments of play is a way of creating connection and a way of changing dynamics between people. That without making jokes has lots of complications around it, but having a little bit of play with someone is a way of keeping that connection.
So, Anne, what is your personal definition of what it means to be healthy?
So this is interesting. I'm gonna quote Gretchen Rubin. This is also her definition of happiness, which is feeling good and feeling right in an atmosphere of growth. And for me, that is sort of the essence of health as well.
Thank you, Kelly.
This is hard. I'm usually like very good at giving quippy, well-framed, well-contextualized sound bites, and I don't think I have one for you, so I am going to improvise my answer. Clarity of mind when your body is operating as well as it can. And I think that a theme that came up today that I don't know people would normally tie to health, which is curiosity, because I think by maintaining curiosity, that makes you open to experience, open to ideas, open to change. We don't often allow ourselves to change. Change is hard. And I know for myself, because I have changed quite a bit throughout my life. And that has been a net huge positive. Because, especially at my age and where Anne and I started out at this comedy theater, it was a very different place when we were coming up to what it is now. And there was some bad stuff. There was some other stuff that you cannot look at 1988 with 2022 eyes and judge everyone. But you can exist in the year 2022 and operate with the manual you have now. And that's an improved manual. My friend Dolly Chugg, who's a NY Stern professor, wrote a great book called The Person You Mean to Be, talks about viewing things like DE&I like we would an upgrade on our iPhone. It's like you're going to take the upgrade every year. Like, so if you get more information, better information about how to operate in the world, why would you not use it? And I think that's a better analogy. Atmosphere
of growth, I think, is a significant part of being healthy. I'll talk about physical fitness for a second, because I hated gym class because I am not athletic. And it was decades before I realized, oh no, it's about getting better. It's about working with yourself, being you who you are, and growing and building strength and skill and all of those things. And that really shifted my mindset to a whole element of health, right?
Thank you. Okay, and now it's time for me to contend with Miss Imposter Syndrome, Miss Perfectionism, because those came up. I went to medical school.
All you have to do to do this is say the next thing. One word, just say the next thing, and we're gonna start it. Kelly, let's have a very simple title for this story.
The physician and the improvisers.
But we're going to give ourselves a little bit of runway to practice. So we're going to start with once upon a time. So I'll start. Once
upon
a
time
there
was
an
physician
who
felt
the
burning
of
passion,
but
they
met
several
improvisers
who
gave
them
trouble
and
taught
them
hope.
Well, that's the end. Well done.
Look what we made. Took some twists, took some turns. This is the classic, all of us are better than one of us. That story can never be done. It will never be done again. It was never done before.
I want to ask, because this is the teacher in me, how did it feel for you? What did you notice?
It felt like a test at first.
Uh-huh.
And then just kind of watching your faces and the joy, I said, okay, let me just let go and trust. So then I did that. And then I started to feel like a little girl, like I was having fun. Yeah.
That's an aspect of our work,
Yep.
right? Is this the thing we steadily lose from childhood? We, as children, we play with freedom. Anything is our world. And our friends Jennifer Acker and Naomi Bagdonas wrote a book called Humor Seriously, and this research is in there that we just lose play and humor as we especially get into the workplace, and we don't get it back till we retire. And there's like studies based on that. It's like the educational system, work saps us of play and laughter. And they do that needlessly and at their own peril.
Wow. This was spectacular. I can't tell you how grateful I am for this entire conversation and experience. It was fun. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun.
Thanks for having us.
As you do.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here. It really means a lot to me. One of my higher purposes in life is to help women thrive, not just survive. Here's a testimonial about my work from a trusted and respected colleague, author, coach, Bernadette Jiwa.
In a world that is constantly telling us who we should be, it's very hard to show up as yourself. And you're helping people to do that every day.
If you want to work with me, if you don't want to just settle, contact me at npkhealthintegration.com. Let's connect.